semester. Okay? So I'm going to jump into chapter 16 as soon as I can find where it starts. There it is. How to work with arrays. Even this chapter is not completely up to date. All right? Now, I'm not going to try to confuse you, but just so you know, come fall of next year, we're going to be using the newer, I think, the newer edition of this book. We've got the 3rd edition. The 4th edition has added some of the stuff. The reason I'm telling you that is when I go and lecture on the stuff and re-lecture on some of it in fall, I'm going to use the 4th edition, even though you don't have that. All right, not to confuse you, but because it's got some stuff in it that you won't have. All right, I'm just trying to be as complete as possible. Now, we've done some work with arrays already. You know how to create an array. You know how to use certain things with arrays. All right, and arrays, basically, arrays work really well with loops. You know, if you want to go through an entire array, you want to use a loop. There's different kinds of loops, and this will talk to you about for-ins. There's a for-in, there's a for-each, and there's a for-of. Yeah, that's not at all confusing. And they're all pretty much used in the same way. All right? They're not exact, because if they were the same thing, then why would you have 3 of them? Okay, so we'll talk about some of the methods, and they keep doing this task list application. It's basically a to-do list that they've created in JavaScript. All right, and they refine it, and they refine it, and there's really, as it says in there, there's a couple versions of it. There might even be more than that. All right, it's 9:45. I'm going to try to go no later than, maybe spend 15 minutes or so on this, because I want to give you some time to work on your work. All right, so 2 ways to create an array. You can say var array name equals new array, and you can put a length in there. You don't have to. So you can just say var array name equal new array. So if it was scores, or let really would be better again. Let scores equal new array paren. Totally fine. Or let scores equal bracket. It's almost always done like this because it's only 2 characters. All right. I've told you this before, that if I go and create an array like this rates array in here, we've got 1, 2, 3 rates in here, right? So they are rate 0, rate 1, rate 2, and rate 3. Remember, arrays always start at 0. I could come in there and later on, so if I had this line of code, underneath this, I could write rates, and then in brackets, I could write 10 and give it a rate. So that would be 0, 1, 2, 3, and then rates 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9 would hold no. Okay, you can do that. Very few other programming languages allow you to do and give you the amount of liberalness, whatever you want to call it, that JavaScript does. PHP is another one, but there aren't a whole heck of a lot of them. All right. The reason some people like JavaScript so much is the same reason a lot of people hate JavaScript, because it does give you a lot of freedom. All right. So you can set up an array like this, where you just say new array 4 and then put in the values, or you can do it like this, where you put the values in right away, if you know what they are. All right, so if I was going to do a thing in here, if I was going to have an array I created for the 8 test scores, let's say, if I hadn't graded them yet, I would do it like this. But I would give it an 8, or I'd leave it blank. Then as I graded all of yours, if I was doing it in alphabetic order, then Gabriel B would be first, etc. Type of an idea. All right. So an array can store everything that's in an array is known as they are the array elements. Arrays have a built-in property called length. If you create an array without specifying the length, the array doesn't contain anything. All right. When you create an array of 1 or more elements without assigning values to them, each element is set to undefined. All right, and finally, when you refer to the elements in an array, you start at 0. You already knew all that stuff, hopefully. All right, adding and deleting array elements. A lot of people do it like this, and there's nothing wrong with it. So notice here, would you all agree when you look right there, would you all agree there's 4 values right here where I'm putting the mouse? So if I did the length, it would be 4. Right? Well, by saying here numbers.length, that's going to make it array element 4. So this is 0, 1, 2, 3. If you do it like this, you'll always have the next number in sequence. Does that make sense? There's nothing wrong with doing it that way. In fact, a lot of people do it that way. So again, notice they said undefined. I thought it was null. Maybe it is undefined. It doesn't matter. You can't use it until you give it a value. All right, so they put in 0, 1, 2, and 3, and then they went all the way to 6. So they skip 4 and they skip 5. All right. To delete something, you can say, if you want, as it says, delete, and then give it the name of the array and an element. If you want to remove all of them, notice what it says. The name of the array dot length equals 0. That clears everything out of the array. Okay? And this is, again, I already showed you this. So this would have what? It's in here. Element 0 would have a 1 in it. Elements 1 through 999 would have undefined in it. And then element 1000 would have 1001 in it. I don't know why you do that, but you could. All right? And I'm not going to read this because I think they did a pretty good job right there of just, that's called a sparse array. All right? Again, as mentioned, loops work well with arrays. And typically you want to go from 0, no, you don't want to put a number in there. You want to go from 0 to the name of the array dot length. All right? And you all know from what we covered earlier today that if you wanted to, for example, break out of an array if a certain condition, break out of a loop if a certain condition was there, you could use break. You wanted to skip something. So what if I wanted to go through there and I only wanted the people who passed, not in your class, but let's just say I could do continues if the grade wasn't greater than or equal to whatever, 70 or whatever it happened to be. All right, here's an example of using sum and average. We're going to look at this tomorrow because I'm going to give you an array program. My hope is tomorrow we can spend about an hour. So from 8 to 9, we will go over one array program and two programs that will allow us to do some work on forms. All right, then you'll have from 9 o'clock until 11:55 to work on homework. All right. When you use a for loop to work with an array, you can use the counter for the loop as the index. Yeah, you can. There's a lot of ways you can do this. Again, then they talk about a for in. All right. The for in doesn't require separate expressions to initialize, test, and increment. What does that mean? It means you write less code. So, where's an example? Here. So we've got this array, and it says for var index, that's a variable you're making up on the fly, in the name of the array, and then you can just start using index. Now, when you use one of these special for loops, you shouldn't be changing the array inside of there. You can use it, you can look at its values, you can print out its values, but if you're going to be changing its values, you should use a regular for loop as we have been using. All right? But this is a little easier to write. This, instead of writing in there for var index equals 0, semicolon, index less than numbers dot length, semicolon, plus plus index. It's less typing. All right. That would work as well though. Okay. All right. And they show you some differences in here, but I think I just went over it with you. So you can use the for in statement to create a for in loop that accesses only those. This includes, yeah, whatever. How to use the methods of an array object. These are just some of them. This is not an inclusive list. Even if you go out to that Hunlock thing I just showed you, it's not an inclusive list. You want a more inclusive list? Go out. I've given you at the bottom of that email that I just sent you, and I think I'd sent it to you earlier this week also. I've got the developer.mozilla.org array thing in there, and I've got the one from W3 Schools. But these are some of them. Push. All right? Pushing, adding one or more elements to the end of an array. And the key word there is end. So push sticks it on the end. Pop removes it from the end. Okay? So push and pop work with the things at the end of the array. If you want the stuff at the beginning of the array, you use unshift to add it to the beginning of the array, and you use shift to remove it from the beginning of the array. You know, why did they pick those words? I'm not sure. All right, maybe there's a story behind it. I have no idea. All right. There's a built-in method right here. I'm going down a little bit. No, they don't even show it right here. There's a method called sort. That if I've got an array with, let's just say I had 1,000 scores in there, and I ran sort on it, would put them in ascending order. If I wanted them in descending order, I could run the name of the array dot sort, then I could say dot reverse, which would reverse it. Okay. Splice allows you to remove, it actually changes the array. That's the key thing with splice. It changes the array. It allows you to cut some stuff out of it if you want to do so. You can even create a brand new array. Okay, just cut out the stuff you want. So there's things you can use. And notice, because it gets confusing, there's splice and there's slice. Splice changes it, slice does not. All right? Slice returns a new array, but it doesn't change the existing array. All right. There's Concat, which allows you to change, add two arrays together. I've got one array with 1, 2, 3 and another array with 4, 5, 6. I can do a concat. Now I've got an array with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Also, and I told you this earlier in the semester, with arrays, they don't have to hold the same type. When we get to C#, when you are in Java, I can make an array, but if I have an array of integers, they can only hold whole numbers. If I try to put, in either one of those languages, put in a blank, or put in a string, or put in a float, a number with a decimal, it'll break. JavaScript, you can combine, the same array can hold any kind of value. I can have a Boolean followed by a whole number, followed by a string, followed by another Boolean, followed by a date, etc. You can do all that stuff. All right. Okay. As it says, the first 7 methods shown modify the original array. The last 8 produce a new array. So you can look through those when you get time if you want to. All right. So some of these I already mentioned. There's sort, there's for each, another way that you can loop through. All right. And some of these are new. They've done a better job here. But most of the stuff that you see in here with map, filter, and reduce, those are 3 that, like, for the fall semester, you're going to have to understand how to use those. All right, so map, as it says, it accepts a function that is executed once for each element and returns an array containing the results of each function call. So again, if I wanted to burrow into an array that had maybe millions of records in it and only find the ones that meet a certain criteria, grab those records, take them out, and make a new array, I could use map. All right. Filter works a lot in the same way. Notice returns a new array containing the element. It looks almost the same. All right. And reduce accepts the functions reduced to one value. That's not going to make any sense until you start going through the stuff in more depth and breadth of coverage. All right. But at least I wanted you to see these. So the reduce and reduce right accept an optional second parameter. Yeah, that's fine. Notice it says all of these methods, with the exception of the sort, are part of ES5. That means they've really been around for about 6 years. Right now they're on like I don't know what the ES is. But ES5, ES6, and ES7 are the best known ones. And I think that was in 15, 16, and 17, or else it was 16, 17, and 18. I don't know. So they've got some programs in here that give you examples of array methods. Again, why this is so slow, I'm not real sure. But they show you push and pop, slice and concat, join, sort. You're going to see some of these tomorrow. All right. When I wrote the program we had tomorrow, I tried to make it intuitive, so I didn't use a lot of this new stuff. I could have. All right. In fact, some of these programs I've just modified over the years, but I've actually wrote them several years ago. So here's that to-do list. So again, the idea is you put in a task here, you click add task, and it goes over here. Or you take your mouse and you highlight one of the tasks over here, you click clear tasks. In fact, I don't even think you can do that. I think when you click clear tasks, they all go away. All right, so again, I think you could all build the interface. Not very hard. And here's the JavaScript. So notice they're pushing on the new tasks. When they want to remove all of them, they're just setting it equal to an empty array. Other things for working with arrays, it says how to use a string method with an array. The key thing to using arrays is to realize when you're going through that loop control variable, that holds the value of the current array element. If you understand that, you're halfway towards understanding it anyway. All right. There's a method that's called split. So if I've got a string that says, hello there, how are you? Okay. If I run split on that and I say I use the delimiter or separator that they call being a blank space, it'll make an array. And the first element will be hello. The second element will be there. The third element will be how. The fourth element will be are. The fifth element will be you. Does that make sense? Now, in some programming languages, they call, instead of calling it split, they call it explode, because they're taking something that's one thing and exploding it into other things. They also have a value, I don't know if JavaScript has it, but since there's an explode, there's an implode. So an implode would take like a string with 5 different things in it, and it would concatenate it together. I'm sorry, it would take an array with 5 elements and concatenate it together like into a string. All right. They also have associative arrays in this language. Who cares? Well, notice you don't have to put numbers in there. And I may have even given you this example earlier, but if I had an array called states, it would be much nicer. I don't know. Let's just say alphabetically. I don't know what it is, but let's say Missouri is the 33rd state alphabetically. Well, do I really want to remember that states 33 equals Missouri? Or do I want to say states, then double quote, MO double quote, in the brackets equal Missouri? It's much easier when you use, so some things like, some programs really resign themselves well to using associative arrays. All right? Others, not so much. Much easier if you don't have an associative array with numbers, if you're just running them through it and just constantly looping through stuff to use numbers. You can also have an array of arrays. So a 2-dimensional array, as an example, would be like a spreadsheet, rows and columns. A 3-dimensional array you could probably draw, but it's even hard to fathom, and I know anybody who thinks in 4D. But you could have an array with as many dimensions as you need it to have. All right, I'm not going to go over that. You can look at that if you so desire. Then they go back and they make the task list a little bit better. Notice they got a due date on it now, and they even bring a drop down with a date thing in there. Other than that, it pretty much works the same. But you can put them there when you think that it should be finished. So the new stuff, as always, is in there in yellow. It's a pretty neat program. Again, if this happens every semester, I would love to sit there and spend some time on this. But then every time I do that, I'm taking away time that you have to work on your work. All right, so that's pretty much it. So you now have at least been exposed, so to speak, to this stuff. And tomorrow we will go over 2 programs between 8 and 9. The rest of the period will be lab. The rest of the period today is lab. Monday, chapter 6, hopefully an example, and then lab. Tuesday, chapter 7, hopefully an example, and then lab. Wednesday, no class for Veterans Day. Thursday, I will try on Wednesday to prepare you some kind of a pretest so you know what to expect when you take the test. So you can plan on that next test, the one on 6 and 7, to be Monday, I think that's the 16th, but I don't know for sure. Yeah, Monday the 16th. Everybody cool on what we're doing then for the rest of this week and for next week? All right, the rest of the period then is yours.